Hello, and welcome to the Industry 4.0 Club. Also referred to as the I4.0 Club, our main purpose is to engage the power of diverse worldwide talent to accelerate the global evolution to Industry 4.0. We accomplish this by hosting respectful, thoughtful, and interdisciplinary open conversations. Our aim is to create quality content on wide-ranging Industry 4.0 topics to expand the reach of the community. We're glad you've decided to join us for today's conversation. I'd like to wish you all a good local time. This is Women in Manufacturing, a conversation on topics around I-40 with a focus on tech and manufacturing. In this space, we discuss the perspectives and challenges of women at work and at home. Our topic of discussion for today is opening doors for high potential leaders. I'm Carol Mitchell-Lin, an Industry 4.0 Club co-founder. For over 5 years, I've been creating content for I-40 adoption in manufacturing. When I'm not supporting my fellow co-founders, I'm a content marketing specialist at Raven, where we help manufacturers engage operators to provide meaningful human context to production on the shop floor. First, I'd like to introduce my co-host and fellow Industry 4.0 Club co-founder, Grace Donovan. Hi, Grace.
Good afternoon. Hi, Carol. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Kristen. We're so excited to dive into the conversation. As Carol mentioned, I am an Industry 4.0 co-founder, and in my typical 9-to-5, I am the business development lead for the US for Andonics, which is a software as a service company serving manufacturers, making sure that your people, processes, and machines are connected with state-of-the-art technology. So really excited to have you here today.
Thanks, Grace. Today, we're pleased to have as our special guest, as mentioned, Kristen Dickinson. Kristen is the program manager for executive and leadership development learning at Train Technologies. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, ladies. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. We really appreciate you taking time to be with us today.
Yes. So let's dive right in. Welcome, Kristen. So that our audience and our community here at the I4.0 Club can get to know you, can you tell us a bit about yourself and kind of your journey to your role currently with Train Technologies?
Absolutely. It's been quite the journey. So I'm Kristen Dickinson. I am a wife, a mother of 3 young kids, all 7 and under. So you can imagine I have my hands full there. I am, as was mentioned, I'm currently working with Train Technologies. I moved over here about a month ago. I think I'm on week 5. So still really getting into everything here at Train. I started my career in learning and development. I was a trainer. I started developing standard work, requests for proposals, that sort of thing. Moved into Ingersoll Rand, which was at the time part of Train Technologies. They were the same company at the time, in the service part of the business as a service training coordinator. Spent a couple years doing that. We got a little echo there.
Sorry about that. Is that better?
So far, sounds good. All right, so with Ingersoll Rand, I started with service. I was doing logistics for training, developing training content, developing some really cool, innovative training experiences like virtual reality experiences, that sort of thing. And then I moved into more of a new product development role where I was the voice of our service technicians in the field for all new products developed with Ingersoll Rand's compression business.
Content, developing some really cool training experiences.
And then, I spent a couple years doing that, and now I am with Train Technologies. I've kind of come home, as it were, back in the learning and development and people development space.
Awesome. So when we kind of had a conversation kind of in preparation for this, you mentioned that you were oftentimes kind of the only woman in the room. You were often the youngest in the room and the only one from service. So could you tell us a little bit more about like what that experience was like? So, and kind of transitioning from a senior leader in field competency and serviceability to product development discussions. What was that transition like? How did you kind of keep your voice and make yourself heard for the benefit of your team and the company?
Yeah, that was quite the transition. So when I first started the role, I was coming into a role that had been established. It was the person in the role prior to me was a gentleman who was very, very technical. He had a lot of background in compressors, engineering, all of that sort of thing. So he had been really in depth with some of these projects. And then I came in and I had never worked on a compressor. I had not spent years in engineering. I was coming from more of a project management base. And so I really had to take some time to make that role my own. At the time, we were still all one company. It was Ingersoll Rand. Train Technologies was part of it. So we really served just one brand there, which was Ingersoll Rand. And so I started getting into all of these different new product development meetings specific to the Ingersoll Rand brand channel. And I found pretty quickly that a lot of times nobody was expecting somebody from service to be a part of the meeting. So the very first thing I had to do was hunt down where the meetings were, who was leading them, who I needed to talk to, how I would get an invite, reminding them that I needed to continue to get invites just because it wasn't habit, right? And so I spent a lot of time at the very beginning just getting into the meetings themselves. I spent a lot of time trying to be in those meetings and just listen. I didn't have the technical background. I didn't have all of this engineering experience, this new product development experience. But what I did have was the desire to learn, the desire to listen, and the desire to be able to speak for our technicians. And over the first couple of months, I started getting involved in all of the projects. I would really lean into our technical team, our service team, to get any of those insights that I was missing about the technology behind some of these things. But it really came down to what are the standards for new products that are being developed to make sure that they work for our technicians, and that they're safe, that they're reliable, and that sort of thing. And so I really just, it was weird because oftentimes I would be the only woman, but that wasn't even the hard part. The hard part was making sure people listened to the service voice because they weren't used to it. They would be designing something, it would all be engineering, it would all be marketing, it would all be commercialization. But then once that product was out the door, there really wasn't a whole lot of focus on what happened to it afterwards. And so I had to make connections with the people on these new product development teams to ensure that they start remembering that, hey, this machine has a huge long life after we've launched it. And we really need to consider that part of the equation at the very beginning.
So could you maybe give us an example of what were some of the concerns or things that like service was voicing in these meetings? Sorry for the background noise.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I can go any number of ways, but one of the things that stands out to me was there were several products, and anybody who is familiar with compressors, some of them can be extremely large. We're talking the size of a 2-car garage even. So there are some really big products out there. And some of what the new products were trying to do was cut down on that footprint so that you had more space in your factory to do other things with. And so if you ignore the service side of things, you can design something that's a lot more compact, and that's great. You save space, you save all sorts of things that way. But what happens if a technician has to go work on it and they can't reach a crucial component because you've now smushed that footprint? And what's more is, how much is it going to cost for a technician to have to take apart these massive compressors just to reach an air filter that they have to service every 2 years or something? And so it was really bringing in the real world experience of the field service technicians and our service teams that support those technicians, and bringing that to life for the people designing these machines. Smaller footprint is great, but we also have to be able to work on them. They have consumables, things that you have to service, just like your car, just like your air conditioner. And so that was one of those really big things that we started bringing in from the service perspective that maybe was missing before.
That's super interesting. And I see a lot of parallels kind of with your, experience in kind of DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, of like making sure that there's a lot of perspectives that are like brought to light. What was maybe that conversation around convincing a lot of the people that, yes, I do need to be in this room because it is important, and maybe some of these are the reasons why? I think it's really interesting to kind of dive into that intersectionality that interplays in these conversations, but has a really tangible and beneficial outcome.
Yeah, that was something that I really had to figure out for myself, because the person whose footsteps I was following in was a white man, and some people knew him already. He already had this niche, and I came in and didn't know most of the people I was working with. And to your point, it wasn't right away. I didn't show up to the meeting and suddenly everybody's listening, everybody's asking what service felt. It was really about staying in it and pushing to be involved. The biggest thing was getting those invites. I had to get the invites for these project meetings and then show up and continue to have a consistent presence, a consistent voice, and making sure that they also understood that we were hearing their side as well. It wasn't like, this is service, this is all that you have to listen to, nothing else matters. It's, hey, I think that your design is great. I love the footprint shrinkage. I love that you're trying to meet these customer demands, but did you think about this? Did you think about this? And being able to kind of funnel the experiences that our tech support teams have had with some of these machines in the field, and funnel real world examples into these new product development meetings, which sometimes feel like they might be only lab based, right? Like, we're just playing in CAD, we're just building things in this little room. It brings the outside world into it. And I think over time, and with the consistency and the real world examples, we were able to come to a really holistic view of the machine, instead of just, this is what it looks like in design and these are all the things we have to do in the field. It's all together. And that was a really exciting experience as these things started coming together.
That's awesome. Thank you. Carol?
Thanks, Kristen. Yes, I think what you mentioned, how you showed up at the meeting and you showed consistency and that you're committed to a teamwork environment. I think that's valuable advice for anyone who's trying to make headway if they're definitely in a new role. What made you realize that was something that you needed to do? Was that advice someone gave you, or was that just something that you saw was the best way to do it?
I think it just kind of happened naturally or organically. When I first got into the role, I knew that I had a lot to learn, and the best way to learn is to connect. You have to connect with the people that know the information, whether that's somebody on my team at the time who supports the field service technicians and knows all the things that happen in the field, or if it's going to an engineer that's on the project and being like, hey, I don't really understand this design, can you explain it to me? And understanding that I will never know everything. I will never be an expert on everything, but being willing to connect with the people who are. You also kind of build that two-way rapport and that two-way lane of trust that you bring then into these cross-functional meetings. And suddenly you're like, well, hey, she knows that I know what I'm talking about. I can be comfortable explaining some things, but I also know that she knows what she's talking about. And I know that there's some benefit to me for listening to her. And so really, I think the big thing was just connecting in that learning space first, and then building on those relationships I had made to help bring all of those different perspectives and the trust and the understanding into the cross-functional teams.
That's very helpful. And I'm wondering if maybe that's the approach you took when you were working with the women's employee resource groups.
Yep.
As well. And I wanted to know if you, specifically regarding the ERG, what kind of success stories did you see while you were involved with that?
Oh, Carol, I could go on for hours about that one. So a little background story for those who aren't as familiar with Ingersoll Rand and Trane Technologies. They were all one company up until March of 2020, at which point the two companies split off. So Ingersoll Rand became its own organization and Trane Technologies became its own organization. Ingersoll Rand, who I was with at the time, then merged with another organization named Gardner Denver. What happened during that split and the merge is that any previous employee networks or employee resource groups or inclusion groups, any of those types of groups, they didn't really exist anymore in this new joined company. And so I was able to connect with some women that I had been close to through previous work before this big company reorg. And it was very clear that we needed something. Because if you keep in mind that timeline, March 2020, what else was happening? COVID. So all of a sudden, not only are we in a brand new organization, brand new colleagues, brand new brands, brand new everything, but we're also now brand new sitting at home while COVID is running. Mm-hmm. And so there was so much good that could come of creating some sort of connecting network. And so I got together with some of the women that I had been close to previously, and I helped launch the Women Inclusion Group, which is WING at Ingersoll Rand. And it was a very small at the time, very passionate group of women who came together and were like, look, we know we need to connect. We know we need to promote women in manufacturing. We know we need to promote women within Ingersoll Rand, especially with our new colleagues where we don't know what that culture was like at the time of us merging, but we know what it could be with us together as a team. And so we came together, we came up with a number of different initiatives that we wanted to put in place, and we just started running. We hit the ground and we were like, look, this is what we need to do, and we need to do it quick. So within the first year, we had built and launched the women's empowerment circles, which are like mentoring circles where 8 to 10 women get together virtually, cameras on, discussing a topic within their group every month. We launched the connection with WIM, the Women in Manufacturing Professional Organization. I think we had a lunch and learn for every single month of the year, starting 2 weeks after we launched WING officially. So we had events, we had just all sorts of different initiatives going to start bringing the women of Ingersoll Rand, the allies at Ingersoll Rand, together again in a virtual environment, which ended up being really helpful because we had just merged with this other organization, which was not geographically close to our organization. And being virtual allowed us to connect in a way that we never would have pre-COVID. And so it really had some blessings. And that power of connection has just been incredible over the last 2 years.
Well, that's a great story in itself. And what was the main driver for ensuring that you kept it going throughout COVID, like with the monthly lunch and learns?
Passion. There were so many women at Ingersoll Rand, the new Ingersoll Rand, that believed in the power of women, that believed in the power of connection, that wanted to make a connection. And we harnessed that. Wing and the other employee resource groups at Ingersoll Rand are all volunteer led. There is nobody there that is paid to do the work. They do it because they believe in it, and it gives them something back. It refills their bucket, as it were, of energy by taking the time to do these things. And so we harnessed the power and the passion of volunteers to drive all of these initiatives. We formed, I don't even remember now, there's like 7 or 8 different committees. And on each committee, it's a group of volunteers that is focused on that one particular initiative, whether it was events or women in manufacturing, or we have a committee for the empowerment circles. There was a lot of different committees, but each group was fueled by the passion of the volunteers that were working in it.
That's really, I think, amazing. And the fact that there was such a widespread kind of passion for this, it wasn't just you like instilling it, but it was something that was very much shared. Definitely, I think, gives it a lot of power as a grassroots thing. And I heard you mention in a different interview that I'm gonna pull into this one because I think it was so fantastic, was like putting together a personal board of directors for yourself, like as a woman. Was that part of this kind of wing initiative, or is that something just in addition to?
So it was actually one of the lunch and learns that we
Awesome.
put on. And just to add to the connections, this was an external speaker that we met at a Women in Manufacturing professional organization event. And we had her speak as a lunch and learn speaker to the organization. And her big thing is how important and how powerful your own personal board of directors is. And I took that to heart, and I can't even begin to tell you how incredibly powerful that was for me. And
I mean,
still
it
is.
makes, yeah, it like resonates. Like, I heard you mention it and I was like, wow, yeah. I think oftentimes the concept of like finding mentors can be kind of nebulous, but like giving it that structure or even that image of a board of directors gives you, okay, you know, 5 to 9 people that I can go look to and that have different sets of expertise. Like it gives it a framework and it just makes a lot of sense because, no intentional business is going to go super far without a board of directors with that oversight and accountability. And I think the same thing when you're talking about like your personal goals and professional goals, to have that with you. So how's that gone for you? Have you built one?
Oh, I did. And I have been so lucky, and I'm still so lucky to have the board of directors that I have. I had started doing it without intentionally doing it. And then when I heard this woman speak, I was just like, this is brilliant. I need to intentionally finish building out this board. Because at first I just started in sort of a friendship, mentorship type role with a couple people. And then I had this weird thought that I was like, well, aren't you only supposed to have one mentor? Like, why am I talking to multiple people about this same thing? And then it started clicking that, hey, well, multiple people have multiple points of view. They have different backgrounds. They have different areas of expertise. You can ask 200 people about the same topic. And as long as they give you helpful information and guidance, you're great. And so what I set out to do was I intentionally built a very diverse board of directors. Had one of the leaders of the women's inclusion group that I had been connected with for years. One of the leaders in the engineering field, which is completely outside of my little area, but he had so many business insights and so many relationship insights and so many insights on how to better connect with people in engineering and men in engineering who might not be used to talking to people in service. And I built some additional seats on my board of directors through different experiences, different opportunities, applying for a role that maybe I wasn't ready yet for. I connected with the hiring manager there, and he became one of my mentors or my board of directors. And so I think anybody who is looking to develop themselves either personally, professionally, and it doesn't have to be for another role, it can be for the role that you're in right now. But I highly recommend trying to put together a group of people who has your back, who holds you accountable, who gives you insights into things that maybe you're not seeing. But also don't hesitate to be open to adding to that. And sometimes people will fall off. Like as I transition to train technologies from Ingersoll Rand, it's possible that some of my board of directors will change. And that's okay too. It's ever evolving. It's not a static thing.
Yeah, I think you raised so many good points. And one, I think, is just having that diversity of experience and getting those different viewpoints. In my previous role, I worked in an organization that was really centered around mentorship for, people that were building businesses. And one thing that I picked up constantly was that I would take them to meet these different mentors, and all of the advice would be different, sometimes even conflicting. But I was like, this is actually the beauty of it, because we're getting these different perspectives. We're looking at different ways that things could turn out. And it's really up to you to like make that, take that advice and do with it what you will. But at least you have those different options. And if everyone's telling you the same thing, then yes, there's consensus and you should take action.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's a time for convergence and there's a time for different opinions. But so you've mentioned, women in manufacturing, kind of the professional organization. I think it's purely coincidence that we share the same name. We fully support their mission. We're very much aligned in that sense. You said you're also involved in Mothers in Manufacturing. As a mother yourself, what made you want to get involved in Mothers in Manufacturing specifically? And we'll start there, and then I have a bit of a follow-up.
Yeah, so really to me, and this is kind of the thread through this whole conversation, is the incredible importance of connecting, both with people who share similar experiences as you, like moms in manufacturing, or who, just might be able to offer you a way to continue to develop yourself or expand your horizons or whatever the case may be. And so Moms in Manufacturing, I believe, is an offshoot of the Women in Manufacturing professional organization. And I didn't actually know about them until one of the leaders of WIM reached out to ask if I would be interested in joining their conference this year. And so I joined because I'm a joiner. And I want to continue to expand my network. I want to continue to build relationships. And I got a chance to go to their virtual conference this year. And it was so incredibly empowering and uplifting to just be surrounded by another group of women who were moms, who were caregivers, who were grandmas, who were aunts, who were, they had some form of guardianship of children that is very unique to that type of person. And then also to be raising these humans while also being a working person, trying to excel in your career, trying to, just sustain yourself, especially in the world that seems sometimes like it's gone a little crazy. And so I've really enjoyed the connections I've made through Moms in Manufacturing, and just knowing that there's a group of women just like me out there is really nice.
Yeah, I think I can certainly, maybe potentially even like find another mentor, in that space, add them to a board of the directors for sure. And so I think at this conference you were asked to speak on burnout, and I think to provide some additional context to anyone who's joining us today is that throughout the pandemic, this is something that we statistically saw, was that women were bearing a lot more of just everything, still working, still providing a lot of domestic labor, childcare, caring for others in our lives. And so this contributed significantly to burnout. And so that's kind of like a little bit of that context. What could you share a little bit about what that conversation was like and what were some of the big takeaways?
Yeah, so I was able to host a roundtable on it where we got to really just talk about burnout and what it meant for the particular audience, which was moms in manufacturing. And I liken it to a sandbox. You start each day with this box of sand. The amount of sand you have in it really depends on if your kids slept last night, if your spouse was snoring, if the dog was sleeping on your head, like that kind of thing. So you don't always start with the same amount of sand. On a Monday morning when things are not going that great, maybe you already are starting kind of low. But as individuals, as moms, as women, there are things that take that sand out of your bucket. Things like constantly worrying, are my kids happy? Are they learning? Are they excelling? Am I teaching them to be a good person? Those are constant drains. The mom guilt is a constant drain. The worrying about the pandemic, if that's on your mind, or worrying about politics, if that's on your mind, or any given thing, we already have these constant drains on our sandbox, and we're not doing anything to refill them because we just don't have time. And then you also have things like your day job. I have to prepare for this meeting and I'm not looking forward to it. There's a scoop of sand out the door. I just got into an argument with my boss about taking some time off to take my kid to the doctor. There's a big old bucket of sand out of my box. And so I started talking to these women about a lot of those ideas, and the idea that we have a finite amount of sand every day. And what happens when it's gone? That's burnout. And almost every woman that I talked to in those roundtable discussions was either there or was pretty darn close to running out of sand. And so it was really impactful because I'd been there. I'd been so burnt out. I was ready to walk away from my career. I was ready to walk away from just everything and be like, I'm done. I can't anymore. Until I found a way to start refilling it. Even if it was a grain at a time, I started really understanding that there are things that you can be passionate about that will actually refill your bucket even as you're expanding or expending your energy to complete it. And what that was for me was the women's inclusion group at Ingersoll Rand. And so doing that kind of work, yes, it took energy, but it ended up refilling my sand table faster than it was taking it out. And so in those roundtables, we started talking a lot about what other people could do to find more sand or to stop some of those leaks, like the mom guilt that most of us have. And it was a really wonderful conversation.
I think like it's a great reflection, I think, to think about like how we're expending our energy, especially I think, working from home certainly has its challenges. I know that's like still the reality for a lot of people. We also know there's lots of folks who don't necessarily have that, opportunity to work from home. But regardless of that, situation, like there's, buckets of sand that are being taken out at all times. So finding ways to replenish that, makes kind of the load a little bit lighter, right? Like you have a full tank of gas, like you don't have to be super cautious about, how you're expending your energy. And I think that's extra important as well when burnout, like when it happens, I think people, it's not something that's easily, recoverable from. Like this takes a lot of time as well. And like the temptation to kind of like walk away from things and then like is real. But then if you're not, again, finding those little bits of joy and things that are going to like nourish you, emotionally, physically, mentally, all of the ways, that burnout's not going to go anywhere. Right. So I think that's like so I just wanted to kind of put a little more emphasis on that point of, find things that bring you joy, and that's going to really help you stay afloat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Kristen, if by getting together and actually talking about burnout, which is, I think some people are afraid to talk about it because it makes them feel that they're weak, or maybe they're actually whining instead of asking for help. And I'm wondering if just by getting together and talking about it, did you find that women were able to learn different coping strategies from each other? Like, oh, I tried this works, or maybe I tried this and this works a little for me.
Yeah, so we were able to connect a little bit. Unfortunately, the roundtable sessions were pretty short. We probably could have spent a lot more time really getting into some of the refilling mechanisms that some of us have found. But one of the things that really stood out from those discussions was the impact of physical activity on refilling your bucket. As much as it will continue to take sand out, you may be able to put more sand in or have your sand last longer when you're able to engage in physical activity, whether it is taking your morning call while walking the dog up and down the street, or if it's going to the gym at lunchtime, which I'm lucky enough to be able to do, or just anything around physical activity and its incredible impact on your mental health and your burnout level. That was probably the biggest takeaway from those roundtable conversations.
I think I'll actually start doing that. It's a great idea.
It's amazing.
We have a standing 8:30 call. Take that and walking around the block, get some of that fresh morning air.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And again, you mentioned like there's a return on investment of sand, right? Like we can talk about things in that sense. Yeah, you're going to expend energy, but you're going to get a lot more back.
I like the idea of finding creative ways. Sometimes the solutions are right there in front of us, and we get so in our tunnel vision of what needs to be done that we don't often realize, the options that we have that can actually make little micro improvements in our day.
Yeah, just
I like
tweaking
that, the
little
micro
variables.
improvement.
Yeah.
Now, Kristen, I'd like to talk a little bit about our topic as well today, executive leadership development, and what you're doing at Train. Where I know you've only been there for a short time, but in the time that you've been there, and maybe you can even reflect on the time you were at Ingersoll Rand, is the opportunities, where you see opportunities for women in executive leadership in manufacturing.
Yeah, so let me start with Ingersoll Rand first, because it kind of directly led to this move for me. So while I was with Ingersoll Rand and while I was working with the Women's Inclusion Group there, we built a pilot Women's Emerging Leadership Development Program. We called it WELD. And with a group of very passionate, very strong women, we were able to build this virtual learning path where a group of identified women would take several self-paced type online learning courses, and then every module would get together with a peer circle of their cohort and a couple of moderators from the Women Inclusion Group to discuss what they had learned, how they can apply it, what their big takeaways were, some self-reflection questions. And just the power of having a program that is designed specifically for women, that is designed specifically to help push them to grow themselves, because some of it was self-paced, some of it was you had to want to get into the program. And so just seeing the power of that and how excited the women who joined our first cohort were to be there, to learn these things, to put the extra time into doing it. It's not like that was part of their day job. It's not like that was helping them cross off a bunch of stuff on their daily to-do list. This was in addition to their daily work. And they were so excited to be there. And they were so excited to connect with each other, because these cohorts, they're small cohorts. It was 5 or 6 women plus the leaders from the Women's Inclusion Group. But they were able to connect with different functions and different parts of the business, different businesses within Ingersoll Rand. And not only did they learn what they were taught on those self-paced learnings online, but they learned from the other women in the organization. And those are connections that they can take with them once the program is over, once they've graduated, once they move on. They are now connected to all these other women in the organization. And that's incredibly powerful. And so when I moved to Train Technologies as the program manager for executive leadership, I brought all of that passion and all of that good feeling into this role. And I'm so excited to be here. Train Technologies has an incredible portfolio of learning and development programs for all levels in the organization, all types of different people in the organization. This organization even has a whole program developed for diversity and inclusion, developing an inclusive culture throughout the organization. It's actually part of their onboarding. As a new employee, you go through that course, which is incredible. And so my role in particular, I am responsible for the Executive Leadership Program, which is a top-level leader development program, as well as several other initiatives around annual events and learning opportunities and development opportunities. So still getting really into that part of the role, but incredibly impressed with the wide portfolio and the robust portfolio that Train Technologies has for development of all of their employees.
It's an excellent pitch for a company. It sounds like a place, that after that, a lot of people would be like, hey, I'd love to work at a company like that has these as their priorities.
Yeah, I was, culture played a big role in my decision to leave because I loved what I was doing with Ingersoll Rand. I loved the people that I worked with. I'm still very connected to most of them now, but I was so drawn to Trane Technologies culture. You look them up online, you see awards all over the place. You see a diverse group of executive leadership. I was just drawn to the culture there, and I'm so happy to be here.
You should add recruiter to your title as well.
Yeah.
Totally not getting paid to do that. I'm just sharing.
Now, you yourself, you made a pivot from product to L&D. Now, I'm wondering, in your experience with your first with the first cohort you had at Ingersoll Rand, are a lot of women making similar pivots into leadership roles?
So unfortunately, I didn't get to see what happened with that first cohort. I left, I think, 2 weeks before they graduated.
Okay.
But knowing the women that were in there and being involved in one of the cohorts myself, I can guarantee you that those women are going to go far. There's a lot of really strong, really smart, really passionate women that were part of that program. I have no doubt that they'll continue to exceed expectations.
I was listening to the radio the other day, and actually they were interviewing someone from Women in Manufacturing. Let me confirm that. Ayesha Roscoe, Allison Gralis, who's the president of Women in Manufacturing Trade Association. So they were interviewing her and confirming that, women in manufacturing kind of at all levels in organizations is on the rise, which is like a really promising trend, especially after the pandemic. And we saw those numbers dip significantly, and they've always been a little bit lower. So I just want to, even if you're still seeing the results of these cohorts, like, we're already seeing resurgence of like more women, present in industry, in leadership roles, on the floor. I think that's just really fantastic, and also highlights the importance of having groups like this where you're going to find people that are going to advocate for you or help you and support you and kind of in your professional journey. And it's just really exciting to see that trend is on the up.
Absolutely. And organizations like Industry 4.0 and Women in Manufacturing and Moms in Manufacturing, the more connected you can get as a human being, let alone as a woman in manufacturing, but the more connected you can get, the more you have in the back of your mind that there's this group of people that has your back regardless of what's going on. And so that's just incredibly powerful to know that you may not know these people. Like, you're walking down the street, you're not going to recognize them. But somehow that there's this group of women who has your back regardless of what happens. And it provides that safe space that you need to continue to grow and to risk and to try new things.
That's excellent. That's excellent support to have, especially if you're on a path that you'd like to see yourself go someday, and just knowing that somebody, like you said, has your back. I think it helps to reduce the stress and maybe even be reduce part of that burnout. Knowing that you have somebody to support you. But not all companies are the same size. Maybe as Trane Technologies or Ingersoll Rand, there's still hundreds of mid-sized small manufacturers out there. And what if there's anyone watching or listening? What advice would you have for them? Where the organization can start, or if there's a woman, particularly in an organization that would maybe is thinking of trying to do something like this themselves.
Yeah, so my biggest piece of advice is be scrappy. Remember, Ingersoll Rand, all of their employee resource groups are volunteers. They were built from the ground up by volunteers. It was not company sponsored. It wasn't bankrolled by anybody. So you find other people who are passionate about what you're passionate about at your organization. And if you're the only one, then you do it yourself. One of the really cool things about connecting with professional organizations is you can then leverage those relationships to see what they're doing, get ideas, if you're the only one in your organization who has passion around mentoring, for example, connect with somebody in one of these professional organizations and see what they're doing. See if they have something that can help you. To that end, I was able to connect with a couple of women at the WIM Summer Leadership Conference this year. I was able to build a really awesome mentoring program for our inclusion groups at Ingersoll Rand. She was really passionate about building one at her organization, but she didn't know if her organization would pay anything for it. And I was like, well, hey, I have just the plan for you. Because we built the mentoring program at Ingersoll Rand off of a spreadsheet on SharePoint. And it eventually developed into this really robust mentoring program that connected people across our organization on a professional platform. But it all started with an Excel spreadsheet on SharePoint. So you don't have to go for the very top level product first. Start free. Start with just that passion and that energy that you have about something. Find somebody who can help you make it a reality, and then see where it can go from there.
That's kind of like how the Industry 4.0 Club started.
Actually, yeah.
Just 2-3 people
Scrappy
talking.
Group of volunteers.
2-3 people talking on Clubhouse a few times a week, and that's how we started.
So we can confirm that,
Yes.
from our experience. And I just wanted to pin Joanna's comment here that the WIM Summit is an amazing networking opportunity, provides powerful support for women. I think, Kristen, you've had a lot of great experiences with them, and they have chapters all over the country. So go onto their website, find a local chapter if you're looking to get connected, and see what you can gain from it. So thank you, Joanna, and thank you, Kristen, for bringing that to the forefront. All right. So one thing that we've been discussing this entire fall season here at the Industry 4.0 Club is trailblazing, and kind of speaking to women who are trailblazers. And it's clear that you are actively working and continue our work on finding your path and calling, as a trailblazer in leadership development. So I'm curious what surprises you've uncovered about yourself, and where do your greatest difficulties appear to be? So we'll start there.
That's a tough one. I think
self-reflection.
Right? What struck me the most as I started getting into the women's inclusion group at Ingersoll Rand and especially the people development side of things was how incredibly passionate I am about it. Like, I never saw myself as being one of those people who was a joiner that did all these things, that was hoorah about other people. And I sort of just always assumed I would keep my head down and just make it happen. And but it came to a point in my career where I was like, well, the day job is fine, but what am I doing to make life better for other people? And the incredible energy that I get from working with other women to build programs that build up other women, that connect women to people as a mentor or a board of directors, or if I can share my experiences in a way that helps other people know that they're not alone, that refills my sand table every day of the week. And I love that. And that surprised the heck out of me because I really did not think I was that person. But apparently I am, and I love it, and I'm totally down to embrace it. Some of the challenges, I think, are really just knowing my limits a little bit. As you can probably tell, I took on a lot when it came to the women's inclusion group. And I did all of that while also having a day job as a project manager type role for new product development. My day job, when we merged with Gartner Denver, when the two organizations came together, my day job got exponentially bigger. I went from working with Ingersoll Rand brand to all of the brands within our combined umbrella. So it went from 1 to 8, which is kind of a big deal, in the midst of all of that stuff with the women's inclusion group. But I was like, well, I don't want to give up any of that stuff. I might not be getting paid for that stuff, but that's what makes me happy. That's what refills my energy so I can do a decent or good job at my day job. And so trying to figure out what I had to say no to in order to keep my head above water is one of the things that is a challenge still. And it probably forever will be.
Yeah. I hear you deeply. Because that yes energy that you have of like, yes, I'm going to contribute like my talents and my passion and all of these things to causes and efforts that also bring me a lot of like, more sand in my sandbox. Like eventually it can be a lot to juggle. And so balancing that out with enough no's, it's been difficult for me personally to like learn to walk that line. And like, I think it's like an ongoing experience. I think where you have to continually remind yourself to, protect your energy and protect that sandbox while also making sure that you're getting that back, right?
Right. And that's something that the board of directors is incredibly helpful with. Is one of my board members, as it were, was really, really helpful in helping me learn how to say no, when to say no, and when to hold my ground when no wasn't okay. And I'm not going to say it's easy because it's not. And there are some people that don't listen to no.
Yeah.
But having that sounding board of that particular person was incredibly helpful to just almost back me up. So I know that when I say no, I can kind of channel him and be like, hey, you can blame him for me saying no. But look, I'm saying no because this is just, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And so having that sounding board and that backer is really helpful.
Totally agree. So that's like a fantastic piece of advice and another great reason to start building a personal board of directors. So I guess our final question for you today is, what advice would you give to other young women who are still searching for their path and are still searching for their trail to blaze?
That is a great question. And I think a piece of advice, especially for the women who are listening who are in manufacturing, is don't ever be afraid to be the only woman in the room. Don't ever be afraid to raise your voice and make people hear you. You'll learn over the course of your career how best to interact with certain people. Everybody has their own interaction style. Sometimes you'll rub people the wrong way, and it just happens. And it's something that you can learn from. But don't ever be afraid to speak up. That's the big one. I was very often the only woman in the room, the only person representing service, whatever the case may be, and you just have to own it. Own that you know what you're talking about. Own that you don't know everything. And own that your voice is as valuable as anybody else sitting at that table. That's probably my big piece of advice.
That's excellent advice. And I think also one that's, I think you got to put that in practice. I think this is one that's also, easier said than done, but it's also so important to do. And I remember kind of getting a piece of advice when I was just starting out in my professional career where I was kind of oftentimes the only woman in the room, or I really did not have a knowledge base. I was working in the mining industry and just had zero clue about anything. And my boss at the time was like, leverage that, like ask the questions that you don't know the answer to. There's really no such thing as a stupid question, and you'll be surprised what you uncover. So don't be afraid of, maybe looking silly. Just own it and say, hey, I'm from the outside. Answer this for me.
Exactly.
And that made me like way more successful than I think I originally would have been. So just as a contributing example of it's harder to do than it is to say. Easier said than done, is the other way to put it. But it is so important, and it's baby steps, right? So if there's anyone who's nervous about it, one bite at a time, one step at a time.
Yep. And I'll just put it out there. I am happy to be on anybody's board of directors, or if you just want to chat, I'm here, because it's so important for women to connect and to support each other. Whether you know each other or not, I'm in your corner. So there's that.
That's awesome. Where should people go to connect with you?
LinkedIn is fine. We can always connect that way and then go from there.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think we have a comment here I want to put up here before we move on from Miranda. Great message, Kristen. happy we've connected and will continue to connect. So if you can have an impact on some women by spending your time with us today, Kristen, that makes us very happy.
Yeah, I'm some of the comments that you see, Joanna, who you highlighted earlier, her and I used to work together at Ingersoll Rand with the Women's Inclusion Group. She's doing an amazing job leading that organization right now. So big kudos to her. And then Miranda is actually at Train Technologies. So we are working not in the same part of the organization, but close enough. So, and we connected previously through several different professional organization events. So we knew each other before I got this role. And so the power of connection is everywhere here.
Awesome. Well, thanks, ladies, for showing up today. We appreciate it.
Now that we're approaching the last 5 minutes of our hour, usually we take some time and go through some final thoughts and takeaways that we've taken. And maybe, Kristen, I'll give you the last word. And Grace, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely like building that personal board of directors. Like that just is a game changer kind of paradigm for me. And, through the Industry 4.0 Club and work and just like a lot of places that I've already kind of put myself in certain spaces, there's a lot to, ask from the group, and there's a lot that I can do already with that. So just personally, that's like a super impactful framework, and would highly encourage anyone to do it. I just think it's just an absolute game changer. And, the importance of mentorship and building those connections. I mean, that's really what we've centered a lot of our conversation around, and how that's really going to help you develop yourself personally and professionally. And I think, as women, that's, it's just so incredibly important for us to do, and to kind of build that supportive network. So really thank you, Kristen, for bringing, these frameworks to the table, for, making them known to us, and for sharing your experience and expertise and how to make all that happen. So that's my big takeaway personally.
Excellent, Grace. Thank you. I think that was my number two. My number one, as a mother of two, I think the sandbox analogy that you made for managing our energy, our input and output, I think that's a great way to visualize even, how we're feeling, maybe as a gauge, to really take a quick assessment before we let it get too far and we're in full burnout mode with little chance of recovering. So I think using the sandbox is a great example. And thanks very much for introducing that to us. So Kristen, we'll leave the last word with you for today.
Well, I just want to thank Grace and Carol for having me today. This was a really nice conversation and refilling the sandbox, right? So I'll have a little extra sand for the rest of the meetings this afternoon. But really, I'm so proud to be a woman in manufacturing. I'm so proud to be connected to all of these incredible women and men who are in our industry and trying to make it better, not just as a company, but for other people. And so my big last word is thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Now, before we close, I'd like to thank you, Kristen, for joining us today. And we appreciate your continued interest in supporting, mentoring, and helping women to find a path that works for them. And thanks everyone who joined us in the audience today. And if you like conversations like this, look out for more on our LinkedIn live shows or Clubhouse app. Just so you know, we have currently an autism in manufacturing series that we're running bi-weekly. So check out for that next Thursday at 12:30 p.m. You can find that and signify that you want to attend on LinkedIn's live, and that way you'll get your notifications. And we also wish you a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.